Are you ready for a shocking discovery that could change everything we know about the end times? This analysis of Revelation could be the biggest sign yet that the rapture is closer than we ever imagined. Today, we're peeling back the layers of Revelation 17, 1-18 to uncover how ancient prophecies are unfolding right before our eyes. We'll explore the concept of sin on credit in Catholicism, the enduring influence of corrupt global powers, and what these mean for our spiritual readiness. So let's dive into this video today to know more about the impending signs and how they herald the coming of the rapture very soon. In Revelation 17, we encounter a vivid and mysterious depiction: a woman riding a seven-headed beast. This woman represents a significant entity on earth, described as a harlot who is drunk with the blood of the saints, referring to the persecution of Christians. Who could this represent in historical or symbolic terms? This question often leads scholars and theologians to explore various interpretations of biblical prophecy. Shifting focus to Genesis, we delve into the origins of ancient Babylon, which is historically tied to Nimrod, a pivotal figure in biblical narratives. Nimrod, mentioned in Genesis 10, is credited with being a mighty figure in the Earth's early civilization and is associated with the construction of the Tower of Babel. This connection to Babylon provides a foundational backdrop to understanding the symbols of corruption and defiance against God as portrayed in Revelation. Next, it brings us to the historical context of Rome, particularly during the time when the New Testament was written. Rome, known for its brutal regime, was not only responsible for the crucifixion of Jesus Christ, but also for the martyrdom of many early apostles and numerous Christians who suffered in the Colosseum. This historical backdrop helps us understand why Rome could be viewed symbolically in Revelation as part of the prophetic narrative, a powerful empire embodying opposition to God's people. Though full of complex imagery and prophecies, the book of Revelation serves as a profound source of spiritual guidance for believers in Jesus Christ. It offers insights into the struggles between good and evil, divine justice, and God's ultimate triumph. For believers, Revelation provides future prophecies and reflections on how these divine truths manifest in our lives today. The mystery of Babylon the Great. Robert Breaker talks about something called the mystery Babylon the Great. He says that this idea has been linked with powerful rulers throughout history. These rulers become closer to this mysterious Babylon as time goes on, especially as we get closer to the end of the world. The Bible uses the symbol of Babylon to represent self-centered governments, businesses, and religions. People who study the Bible have different ideas about what mystery Babylon represents. Some think it's Rome, Jerusalem, or a new version of the ancient city of Babylon. The Bible has a part where an angel talks about a woman who has power over the kings of the earth. This woman is also known as Mystery Babylon or Babylon the Great. But the Bible doesn't give a clear answer about what this means. So we need to think about what a city represents in the Bible. Is it a real city with powerful people or a symbol? Many kings and leaders have always wanted more power, wealth, and land. They were never satisfied with what they had. Understanding this desire for authority is important. In some parts of the Bible, like Genesis 6:1, 4 and 10, 8, 12, the desire for power grows before and after a big flood. People used to take many wives or build tall towers to show their power. Although these things are not done anymore, the desire to control land and people is still there. In ancient times, religion and politics were often connected. People believed in false gods, and sometimes these beliefs influenced how they ruled. Kings who were also priests existed in places like Sumer, Egypt, Greece, and Rome. Robert Breaker discusses these connections between religion and politics. Revelation 17 mentions a mystery called Babylon, which is described as being situated on 7 hills. Interestingly, Rome is famously known as the city of 7 hills. This has been a known fact since ancient times. It's very likely that early Christians, including John, understood this connection and thought of Rome when they heard about the 7 hills in Revelation. There's an idea that the devil, who was cast out of heaven, likes to imitate things from heaven. And perhaps he has a preference for places with 7 hills because it reminds him of something from his past. It's just a theory, but some people think that the devil might be drawn to locations with 7 hills because these settings remind him of his previous experiences in heaven. Revelation mentions a lot of 7s, so it's possible there are 7 hills in heaven too. This idea suggests that the devil tries to recreate or surround himself with aspects of what he once had in heaven. 7 hills around the world. Many cities around the world, not just Rome, are built on 7 hills. For instance, the capital city of ancient Byzantium, later known as Constantinople, is also built on 7 hills. It makes you wonder why these specific locations were chosen for significant cities. It's quite intriguing to think about whether there's something special about places with 7 hills, and if there's any truth to the idea that they have a deeper significance, possibly even a supernatural one. Thinking about all this, would you ever consider living in a city built on 7 hills? Knowing the mysterious and possibly spiritual significance these places might hold, it's a curious decision to make. Robert Breaker brings up these fascinating points, leaving us with something to ponder about such geographical features' historical and mystical importance. According to some scholars, the woman mentioned in Revelation 17 undoubtedly represents a city. There's a debate about the exact city this refers to. Some believe that Revelation, written by Peter, was completed before 70 AD, suggesting Babylon is a code name for Jerusalem used in the text. However, others argue that the book of Revelation was likely penned around 95 AD and contains prophecies pointing to future events, not past ones. Historically, many early Christians associated Rome with the city on 7 hills mentioned in Revelation. Robert Breaker offers a different perspective. He points out that Rome cannot be the mother of harlots, as described in Revelation 17:5. Instead, he argues that Babylon itself is the origin of all forms of idolatry and spiritual corruption, including the widespread mother-child cult. Thus, he suggests that Rome might be considered a daughter of Babylon, not the mother. The passage also describes the woman sitting on 7 heads or mountains. There's a discussion among scholars about whether these 7 mountains are actual physical locations or symbolize something deeper. Revelation 17:9-10 clarifies that these mountains are kings, 5 past, 1 present, and 1 future. This suggests a metaphorical rather than literal interpretation, implying that the mountains represent historical rulers and their kingdoms. Further complicating the interpretation, the text describes the beast that the woman rides, which has 7 heads or mountains. This description seems to reveal more about the beast than the woman herself. Additionally, the woman is said to sit on many waters, which most agree is a figurative statement about her broad influence and reach. Given this, it follows that the beast and its 7 mountains, on which the woman sits, should also be viewed symbolically. The Controversial Interpretation by Robert Breaker. Robert Breaker discusses the imagery and symbolism found in Revelation 17, particularly focusing on the figure of the woman, who he interprets as a symbol of deep moral and spiritual corruption. He controversially ties this figure to the Roman Catholic Church, suggesting that its practices, such as the celibacy of priests, lead to moral issues and scandals, referencing historical instances of sexual abuse within the Church. Breaker's criticism extends to the structure of Roman Catholicism, which he sees as a blend of church and state power, a notion he believes is inherently problematic. Breaker argues that Roman Catholicism functions as both a state and a religion, aiming to influence countries. He points to Spanish-speaking countries where the municipal government buildings and Catholic churches often occupy central positions in towns, symbolizing their intertwined roles. Breaker uses this blending of religious and governmental power to underscore his criticism of the Church's historical ambitions, such as during the Crusades, when the Pope aimed to take control of Jerusalem. He further connects these historical actions to prophetic interpretations in Revelation, suggesting that the Roman Catholic Church, seen as seeking power over Jerusalem, mirrors the actions of a figure in Revelation who declares himself God in the temple. This is used to argue that the Church's past actions align with the prophetic depictions of corruption and blasphemy against God. Historically, the identification of Babylon the Great in Revelation has been a subject of significant debate among scholars and theologians. Early Protestant reformers labeled Rome and the Roman Catholic Church as Babylon the Great, seeing it as a source of corruption and apostasy. This view aligns with a broader critical perspective, particularly among those who interpret the book of Revelation as a commentary on their contemporary politics rather than a strict prophecy of future events. Diverse views on the identity of Babylon. The identification of Babylon the Great varies, with some linking it to the ancient city of Babylon in Iraq, while others, like Breaker, argue strongly for Rome due to the symbolic reference to the city seated on 7 hills. The debate continues among modern scholars, with interpretations influenced by different theological and historical perspectives. Further, according to Robert Breaker, if one believes that John's prophecies in Revelation were predicting a biblical entity and not specifically targeting the Roman Catholic Church as the main source of evil, then identifying Babylon the Great with Rome becomes questionable. As a result, few pre-tribulation dispensationalists now understand this viewpoint. Instead, many pre-tribulational writers lean towards the interpretation that Babylon the Great refers to the literal city of Babylon in Iraq. This perspective is mainly based on the repeated use of the term Babylon in the text. Breaker also discusses the timing of Babylon the Great's destruction, particularly in relation to the narrative structure of Revelation. The mention of Babylon the Great in Revelation 17, 1, 19, 4, along with its destruction in the 7th bowl judgment, suggests that Babylon's downfall occurs either at or shortly before the second coming of Christ. If this interpretation holds true, Babylon the Great must represent a powerful entity or empire, possibly the Antichrist's dominion. However, suppose Babylon the Great is destroyed before the midpoint of the tribulation period. In that case, it cannot be identified with the Antichrist kingdom, as the Antichrist remains in power until Armageddon. Therefore, Breaker suggests that Babylon the Great must be connected to an entity even more powerful than the Antichrist's dominion at the beginning of the tribulation period. Its elimination would pave the way for the rise of the Antichrist to power. Breaker references Revelation 17:11, which describes the beast that was, is not, and yet is the 8th being of the 7 and going into perdition. He interprets this passage as suggesting a connection between the Antichrist and Catholicism, or at least Catholicism providing the Antichrist with power. Moreover, Breaker implies a broader collaboration between entities like the European Union and the United Nations towards establishing a one-world government with a singular leader. He also asks how someone could be the 7th and then become the 8th unless they die and come back to life. This situation, he suggests, involves unclean spirits leading the way, which seems to point to devilish influence. According to the Bible, there are seducing spirits that lead people astray, and this could be what's happening here. Breaker imagines a scenario where everyone seeks guidance and looks to the Pope during a crisis. He describes a possible scene at the Vatican where a UFO lands in the middle of a large open space, and the Pope endorses the aliens. This, he suggests, might actually be a fallen angel. He questions the claim by some that they are the true Jews, noting that with the rebuilding of Jerusalem and the reestablishment of Israel as a nation, it's clear God still has plans for Israel. Furthermore, he criticizes the Catholic Church for not teaching the Bible verse by verse, especially the book of Revelation, which they consider symbolic. Destruction of Babylon the Great. According to Revelation 17:6, 7 Babylon the Great is eventually destroyed by the Antichrist and 10 kings from a European alliance. Before its destruction, Babylon the Great significantly influenced global politics and economics. The timing of Babylon the Great's fall, as described in Revelation, must occur before the midpoint of the tribulation period, raising questions about its relation to the other events in the tribulation, like the sealed judgments. Although the sealed judgments in Revelation don't directly mention Babylon the Great, Clues suggest its early destruction during the tribulation period. The first sealed judgment, which shows the Antichrist conquering through battle, Revelation 6, 1 to 2 inches, is consistent with the interpretation that this represents his victory over Babylon the Great. This narrative ties together the events of the tribulation with the downfall of a major power, depicted symbolically as Babylon the Great in the text. According to Robert Breaker, a detailed look at Revelation 17, 1-19, 4 inches shows that Babylon the Great was the top power in the world during the end times. Firstly, Babylon the Great has the biggest economy in the world. It's a key player in creating wealth globally during the end times, making it the center of the world's wealth. Secondly, this power influences global culture in a way that opposes Christian values. Babylon the Great shapes cultures around the world in a negative way. Thirdly, Babylon the Great holds the most political authority globally. Additionally, it is believed to have had the strongest military on the planet during this time. The Book of Revelation describes Babylon the Great as a unique force. It enriches nations but also controls them, pushes its culture on them, and leads them into materialistic decay. This ultimately ends in the global worship of Satan and the Antichrist during the second half of the tribulation period. According to Robert Breaker, the United States currently fits this description. He argues that no other country has ever dominated globally like the U.S. has, especially after World War II, and even more so after the Cold War. He also shares his personal experiences in Honduras, trying to talk about his beliefs with Catholics there. He found it tough because they would dismiss him as just a Protestant and wouldn't listen to what he had to say. This shows how deeply ingrained certain beliefs can be, making it hard to share different perspectives. Robert Breaker recounts an encounter where he felt outright rejection due to religious intolerance. He describes trying to discuss his beliefs with a Catholic leader who wasn't open to considering any perspectives other than his own. He called out the leader for misrepresenting the Bible and questioned where he was leading his followers. The response was dismissive, ending with Breaker being told to leave. This experience highlights a lack of willingness to engage in meaningful dialogue and the presence of bigotry within some religious interactions. Cycle of confession and repetition. Further, he criticizes the practice of confession as followed in some churches, where individuals confess their sins only to return to the same behaviors, thinking they can just confess again. This cycle, he suggests, undermines genuine repentance and personal growth, as it allows people to plan to sin again with the idea that they'll just seek forgiveness later. He shares a story about his neighbor in Honduras, Don Julio, a former Catholic from El Salvador. Don Julio felt that his church was encouraging wrong behaviors by allowing people to sin, believing they could easily be forgiven afterward. This realization led him to leave the church and seek a different path, which led to him finding salvation outside of his former faith. This story illustrates a journey of spiritual awakening and the search for a more accountable form of faith. Breaker criticizes Catholicism's sin-on-credit system, where sinning is made easy because forgiveness is always seemingly just a confession away. He contrasts this with his view of the Protestant faith, where being saved by grace through faith in Jesus should inspire believers to avoid sinning, not make them comfortable with it. He suggests that this fundamental difference in doctrine might explain why some people feel trapped in a cycle of sin within the Catholic Church, and why some, like Don Julio, eventually seek change. The harlot and her influence. Now he discusses how, by the time the tribulation period begins, the mother of harlots, a term used in the Book of Revelation, will have consolidated her influence over her daughters under her control. During this period, those who reject her will suffer greatly, as depicted in Revelation 17:6, where it's stated that the woman will drink the blood of the saints and of Jesus' witnesses. This represents severe persecution of those who stand against her teachings and authority. The rise of ecumenical and multi-religious organizations, like the New Age movement, suggests a return to Babylonian-like practices. These groups promote a belief in finding individual paths to God through works, emphasizing tolerance for all beliefs. Breaker warns that opposing this broad acceptance of all spiritual paths aligns with demonic influence, whether directly or indirectly. This influence fosters selfish goals such as greed, lust, and the pursuit of power. According to Breaker, today's world is rife with global conglomerates and complexes, industrial, military, pharmaceutical, medical, and financial, that all contribute to global governance, mirroring the corrupt practices foretold in Revelation. According to prophecy, such conglomerates will face a sudden end when the world shifts during events like those described in the sixth seal and Revelation 18, where the end of the corrupt city-state is predicted and God's wrath is unleashed. As we approach the prophesied events of Armageddon and the Day of the Lord, the complex relationship between the beast and the harlot city-state becomes crucial. These interactions are emblematic of broader themes of power and corruption. The beast and its symbolic heads reflect the dynamics within this doomed relationship. In essence, the Book of Revelation presents Babylon the Great as a superpower influencing global culture and economy, which Breaker identifies unequivocally as the United States of America. So what do you think of this revelation as a sign that Rapture is coming very soon? Comment below and subscribe for more.